Alright, what's up YouTube? Welcome back to the Cutlass Board Games channel. We are once again in the From Computer to Cardboard series. We are working on the Outer Wilds board game. This has been kind of an insane challenge. In the last episode I talked a little bit about some of my initial game design ideas, and I have a big Google Doc with a whole bunch of notes, stuff, ideas. And it got to the point where it was starting to get a little bit too complex for me. I was struggling to see where all the different things came together. And I realized, well, what is the quintessential Outer Wilds experience, if not looking at a mind map? This is one of the main ways that it helps you track the information and stuff that you've learned and where else you should maybe be going. And, well, it's kind of the same thing I'm doing here. I'm using a tool called MindMop, which is actually recommended to me, and it's really good. Actually, it's pretty easy to use. I use it for some things where tracking a route is important, usually in video game design, but sometimes in board games tracking a route is important. And on screen right now, I've made it intentionally very small so that you can't read it because I don't want any spoilers just yet, is the game. Basically, in playing Outer Wilds, you encounter several things that are gates that you might not necessarily recognize as a gate and requires a piece of information for you to be able to, continue onwards. And so that's kind of what I have organized here. There's a couple of different types of pieces here. All of the orange ones, which you can see is at the top of most categories, is the location. So it's planets and stuff like that. So it's going to be 10 locations. That was something that I kind of picked out at the start. I'm like, I don't want it to be too big, and some of them might not be important enough. So I get their own thing. Like if I'm doing stuff like the probe launcher, that is like really a part of Giant's Deep, but it's not like it's in orbit or whatever. It's just all Giant's Deep together. Like anything that's like in that thing is kind of all encompassing, which I think is probably the better way to do it. It means that I can lump a few things together, save a bit of space. Now, as you can see, starting from the top left, that you can probably guess is Timber Hearth. And as you progress, you will unlock new and different things, and it's sort of organized as like the distance that you would travel from Timber Hearth, and the more complicated those things are. Next in the gray, just kind of going off this little key here that I have for myself. The gray is just like kind of plot points. Whenever you meet an NPC, like Feldspar or Hornfels or whatever, that's the thing that's written in gray, and some other like plot pointy type things. Because I kind of switched from the Google Doc to doing this, so any new plot beats that I had written into this that's not in the original Google Doc is in gray. And eventually, as I go out and make the actual cards themselves, I'll like update it to reflect. Because some of these things might be just one card, it might need multiple cards for how much dialogue or whatever explaining of the story I need to do. Because it is narrative focused, the narrative is kind of important, so I need to make sure that the narrative like really is communicated to the player. Then after that we have kind of a forest green. Now that is when a new location is revealed to you. So normally in Outer Wilds, they're just like, there's the sky, and here is all the objects in the sky. You can fly around and figure out whatever you want. In this, I'm having the different locations revealed to you based on your progress in other things. There is sort of a reason for this. Some of the, just like the main planets, are revealed really quickly, so they're not hidden as much. But some things are a little bit harder to find, and some of that kind of matches how it goes in the game. Stuff like the Interloper, which is very small and isn't super easy to get to, so unless if you are using the map to pinpoint it and autopilot, like actually knowing kind of what it is and seeking it out, kind of really accidentally bump into it in that way. And so it's kind of delegated to be a bit later on, right? So you've explored a few things already, and then now I'm going to go and find the interloper. And the same is for a couple of the other locations. Quantum Moon is kind of the same. Like it requires you to have learned a secret to be able to go there. I'm always trying to be vague and spoiler free as possible, because Outer Wilds is such a game where you can only play it once, and you should be playing the Outer Wilds game before coming and looking at my attempt at translating it into a board game, because spoilers are incredibly detrimental to the experience. So I probably should have said that earlier. But again, I'm always trying to be relatively vague. And so those kind of things that require you to have accomplished something already are going to be gated to be a little bit later on. And that's kind of how this is organized. It's sort of like a graph almost, where it's distance from the left. So like the thing furthest to the right is later in the game space, because there's like many steps needed to accomplish to get to that point. However, its height at the moment, because it's incomplete, isn't quite fully indicative of like what it is supposed to be. But basically, its height is supposed to be the number of steps needed to get to where it is. And some of them are going to be like really big. Like you can see this one on the far right is the tallest one, because the most stuff happens there. And it's important that a lot of stuff happens there, because it's kind of key to the main story of the narrative that I have written for this. Because like I said in the previous video, it can't just reiterate the Outer Wilds narrative verbatim, because then for a player, it's this paradoxical problem, right? A person should only be playing the board game if they have already played the video game. And if they have already played the video game, they already know everything that would happen in the board game if they're the same. So it kind of defeats the point. So I had to change the narrative and do a bunch of stuff. And the reason why that place in particular, I'm not going to say where it is, but that place in particular is so big is because that's where the bulk of the new narrative, the new changes and stuff is. And knowing, because I kind of started with the narrative first, I'm like, okay, what happens in Outer Wilds? What of the core experience do I need to communicate? Because some of it you do to give context and stuff like that. And then it's like, what else do I need to have to communicate the new narrative? And so that's kind of the biggest chunk there. Let's keep going with our key. Now, next and possibly most obvious at this distance is the red nodes. There's a lot of them. Now, the red nodes are gates. So each of the red nodes will say requires this thing, and that means that you cannot progress down the tree without having the thing, the key for that gate, basically. And then the darker blue color with the white text is the key that is going to match a gate. And you can see the lines between these two things quite a lot, and we'll show you where and what is unlocked. And I know that the arrows are a little bit messy, but there is kind of a path that you can trace from Timberhearth here at the start. We kind of escape. You can see that there's a gate there, and then there's some more gates down the bottom. The gates down the bottom are connected to the very, very last location on the right, where that, the secret to that gate is unlocked. And that's kind of how I'm trying to do it. Like, you're trying to do this round trip thing where you come back to Timberhearth for a couple of things, which I think is kind of cool. And so the main process of organizing everything is figuring out where are the gates and what is the gate preventing you from seeing, and where are the keys to those gates. Currently, there is only one. I think it's 2 gates, 1 key. Everything else is 1 gate, 1 key. And I'm hoping that I can include multiple keys for different gates. Probably not a whole bunch, because that might make it you pass through it too quickly, too easily. But maybe something like that. Multiple different places that you could find a key for the same thing, which removes linearity from how you're progressing through the tree. It gives you a bit more options, because my goal is for this not to be fully linear, Right off the bat, you basically show up, you talk to Hornfels, who's the guy that gives you the launch codes in the video game, and then in the video game, you just get in your ship and you just fuck right off and you figure it out. In this, you get the launch codes, you go to leave, and then 2 planets are revealed to you. And then from there, based on which one you pick, there's going to be a bunch of different stuff unlocked. And then you can either just go like directly to the other one, or you can kind of follow down. So like just creates a fork. And then depending on what you do after that, it creates another fork. Except the second fork it includes the option you didn't pick. So it's like this. Which I think works fine, and like that's and it narrows towards the end, right? Like you start completing stuff, it starts narrowing again, and so you end up kind of at the conclusion of the game. But as you can see in this very long note, it's lots of gates and lots of keys. So it has lots of keys for other things. So you basically are going to be hopping from there back and forth a few times, and then going and doing something else, and then coming back and going and doing something else and coming back. Which I think is fine. It means that like you actually are traveling, you are actually exploring, you are actually going, oh, I know I need this thing. Because the way that the game is laid out is you'll have the locations as standees, which will be like, okay, this is Brittle Hollow or whatever. And then there'll be a deck of cards next to it, which will be what these nodes are. Basically, each of these nodes is going to be 1 card. And then it'll be like explains everything that you like. This is the key to this gate or whatever. And then I have that key now, put it in my inventory somewhere, and then it's all together, right? And you're just kind of digging through that deck as stuff happens. You reach a gate, and you can't go past that until you have the key for that gate, and the deck just sits there waiting for you. And so eventually you'll come to a point where there'll be like a bunch of locations that just have gates, and you're looking for places where you can find keys. And so the goal is to try and make it so that you will never have all gates except for one place, because that means that then you're just like stuck in linearity. So I'm trying to avoid that. Which is currently you can see that there's lots and lots of gates because I'm trying to build out the core backbone of the narrative and exactly what things you need to learn to communicate the story, and how places are linked. In the video game, for example, Dark Bramble is linked to a few different places. There's like a spore, for lack of a better word, on Giant's Deep, has its own little island. There's a spore on Timberhearth. And then like in encountering that, you go, oh, this looks like that place, but I'm here on this planet, and then that teaches me something about this other place. Which I think is cool, and that's kind of what I'm trying to do here. So it's like, okay, well, on this place, I learned this secret about this thing for this other place, which lets me, when I go back there later, and do that, right? So the idea is to not... If I have it, so it's like literally you learn a secret, and then you cannot go any further, like a secret to somewhere else, and there's like a gate for something else immediately afterwards, you basically are like rocking like a pachinko machine. You're just bouncing between different planets. So I'm trying to avoid that as well. I'm trying to have spaces where it just creates a bunch of different forks, and then there is a lot of the later locations will just, you'll bounce back and forth to it as you unlock stuff, which I think is fine. I think moving around it should be part of the game. But the main thing is that for the player in the ship, moving around is free. Like it doesn't have any mechanical cost for you to do. Because I think if I'm encouraging you to be moving constantly, it's not good if it's like really limited. Or you can just get stuck where you're like stuck somewhere and there's gates and you can't go anywhere. I just thought it would be too hard to kind of make that happen. And then the last kind of card, and this might be a little bit of a spoiler for my plans, my grand plan, which is the teal color, which you can't actually see because I have my green screen on. 1 second, let me fix that. Bam, magical teal. These are actually NPC movement cards. So I could use this to move Feldspar to another location. That's kind of the idea. Because I wanted to... So one of the things that I found was really interesting in Outer Wilds is that none of the characters actually ever talk to each other. They only ever talk to you. And so it's weird and insular. Even at the very end, where you finally kind of see everyone in one place, they don't actually talk to each other. They only ever talk to you. You are the conduit of all conversation, and it's a bit eerie. And so in this, I actually wanted to make the NPCs move around and talk to each other and stuff like that. And through how that happens is how you learn things, because you can't actually just go to all the places. I can't just build out all of there's like many different puzzles and locations and stuff that you could visit. I don't want to build out every single one. I'm just trying to accrue the narrative, which means like some things can overlap, some things can be removed and put together. Just streamline things a little bit, simplify things a little bit. But having the characters be able to talk to each other gives me the ability to have more narrative emerge in an interesting way, which I kind of like. And so that's like one of the puzzles in it is like I got to get this person to the right place, which means I need that particular teal card, which allows them to move. Now, me and the ship can move freely, but moving NPCs, they can only move to a planet that is adjacent to them. So the idea is that I'll need multiple cards that help move them around. But if they're in the right place, they can potentially be a key to a gate. It'd be like, requires Feldspar here, or whatever, is the gate. And you go, well, I have the card that says moves Feldspar to this planet. He'll come over, and he'll tell me about whatever the thing is, and he'll reveal a secret to me. Which is kind of cool. I like that. In theory, you only have like space in your ship for one dude at a time or something, and you like pick them up and move them to the thing because your ship is small. And that's kind of the idea. So like that's gonna be one of the major puzzles. We have lots of key and gate kind of puzzles, and then there's like a tableau thing that I mentioned in the previous video, which in my head is kind of like done. It's just a thing that I need to mark the cards as I'm doing it in Photoshop, which I'm not up to yet. And then there's one other puzzle, which I can't remember if I spoiled it or not in the last video. And then since then, I've come up with another different thing where ghost matter will appear at the different planets, and then that will determine whether or not you can move people around or where you're going and stuff like that. I haven't fully nailed down exactly how it works, but the plan is to have ghost matter spawn throughout the time, because that is going to align with part of the narrative. And I have these linking cubes. I bought fucking 500 cubes or something ridiculous for the Against the Storm prototype for the first season of this series, and then now I've got to put them to use. So I was like, well, I have cubes. I have cubes that I could be using. They can be ghost matter. Just put some blue cubes down or whatever, and then you'll be able to interact with that or avoid it or whatever. And so it really is starting to come together, but it's incredibly complicated web of how everything is supposed to work. So it's taking a lot of brain power, let me tell you. But I think this is kind of the backbone for the rigid framework. I will probably show this later, maybe when it's complete, so you can see how complex it gets. Right now there's a lot of arrows between the different locations, so we're going to end up with a lot more. And I don't want to zoom in and let you actually read it, because it's kind of spoilery. And some of it's going to change a lot later. A lot of it's just like a placeholder for how you're traveling through the game. It doesn't actually really communicate what's kind of happening. But all of the gates and keys is like spoilers for the video game, and it tells you exactly what the thing accomplished is without context. And so I think that diminishes part of the magic. So I don't want to do that. But there is a lot going on here. Like I have quite a lot kind of happening. I'm really happy with it so far. So I'm really interested to kind of complete this. I know there's a lot more things that I have to do, and actually let's kind of run through it, right? I have all the locations that I want. I wanted 10 locations, so it doesn't take up too much space on the table. I have all of the locations mapped out. I have all of the location reveal cards. That's the forest green. So all of in playing the game, if I made it exactly 1-to-1 what it is now, you could have all of the locations appear. As for gates and keys, there's a lot of gates that don't have keys yet. That's something that I'm still currently working on, because it's like, where and how do you get the key and when, right? Because at the moment there's not many gates that show up that have a key a lot later, because I would rather they were open for like a period of time and then they kind of move around and stuff, and you can dig further. So I think a lot of it is just like kind of bouncing around lots of short hops and stuff like that, which I think is fine. I don't know if I'm going to have too many more gates than this. I might just have a couple of duplicate keys in a couple of different places as a way to make it a little bit less linear. Especially for some of the beginning gates, to have more keys, and then like the more important ones later on to only have one, I think is fine. Now, moving the NPC cards, I've got 2 on there, but I've got like 10 guys. I think each planet has their own person on it. Or like 8 guys or something like that, kind of close to that. And so each of them, in theory, needs 10 move me to a place cards. So that's like an 80 card deck just for that. And I probably don't need to get them to every possible location. I just need to be able to get them to wherever they're going. And if you have a look, if I'm going from just like left to right, I probably don't need move them to a location for the furthest to the right stuff. So it's probably only moving them further to the left. So I can cut a bit there and get maybe a 30 card deck of moving around, and then just like kind of pad stuff, because you kind of pick it up and you go, oh, I could use this, but I'll save it for later. I'm reading what's going on. Kind of like a tool you have access to, but you might not necessarily know where that person needs to be. So you're like, oh, I'll save this for later, which is kind of what I want. I kind of want some stuff where you pick up tools for later that you don't know whether or not it'll be helpful just yet. And I also need to map the keys a bit more, and then I could go through and put down all the plot beats, because only some of the plot beats are here. Go through and put down all the major plot beats and like flesh them out, figure out if it's going to be 1 or 2 cards and stuff like that. But otherwise we get pretty close. My estimate is maybe 60%, which isn't bad. I put many hours into this, and it's really hard. As I mentioned kind of at the beginning of this whole series, is that my intention is to pick games that I like a lot, but also pick designs that are not in my wheelhouse, so that I'm learning new stuff, I'm challenging myself, I'm pushing things, because that's supposed to be, kind of the thing that's interesting for me to come and do it, but also it's interesting for you, the person watching. I'm not just making the same fucking Tableau builder 20 times. I'm actually reaching out, and we had Elise come on our previous episode to talk about escape rooms, give me some ideas. We talked a bit about this to help me, get in the right direction, and I think everything's going well so far. So look, if you're excited to see what happens next, which is going to be maybe finally starting some Photoshop stuff, maybe I'll do a part 2 of this with actually the complete map and run through the whole thing, explain the actual rules of the game and how it is supposed to work. If you're interested to see that, stick around. I'm going to actually put a playlist up on the screen, which is going to have the entire From Computer to Cardboard series in it. You can go back and watch Season 1, which has the Against the Storm stuff. You can go back and watch the beginning of the Outer Wilds stuff. And if this is not the most recent episode, you can go and find out what happens next right away. I will also put up just another random different video, because we do a lot of cool different stuff here on the channel. We upload every single day. So there's always something interesting happening for you to come and check out. And as always, the subscribe button. Now, if you really want to see the Outer Wilds board game come to life, the subscribe button is the best way to guarantee it's going to be delivered to you. So the subscribe button clicker, and stick around, because I'm really excited to see how this all comes together.